What happens when a black female CEO is denied a first-class meal on the very flight her company regularly sponsors? The first light of day streamed through the wide glass panels of JFK's International Terminal, casting a sheen over the polished metal surface of the Astoria Air aircraft, preparing for departure. Inside the first-class boarding lounge, everything exuded a quiet sense of pride, from the soft clinking of crystal glasses to the fleeting glances that seemed casual but carried calculated intent. There, Dr. Amara Ellis appeared, tall, composed, her silhouette defined by a deep navy suit tailored to perfection. She didn't need logos or brand labels to assert her presence. Her stride, her gaze, the silence she chose to carry, all spoke clearly that she knew exactly where she was and why she was there. Seat 1A, the very first seat with the widest view, was her chosen place on every international flight she had taken over the past decade. Not simply for comfort, but as a statement. A black woman seated where convention had long reserved for charcoal suits and the assured gazes of white financiers. She wasn't there to challenge, but to exist as fact. She placed her compact laptop bag in the overhead compartment, pulled out her phone, and scanned through her final emails before takeoff. A confirmation from the Zurich Security Technology Forum, where she would serve as the keynote speaker on quantum intelligence and global data ethics governance. A congratulatory note from Geneva's media liaison, and a message from her assistant, Naomi Bell. Meal confirmed, lobster, filet mignon, and Chateau Léoville, 2005. A small detail, yet to Amara it was a ritual, a personal affirmation that she could occupy any space in the world without needing permission. So when the flight attendant approached, a blonde woman named Brielle, with a glance that seemed to look past Amara rather than at her, she simply nodded with courtesy. "Good afternoon. I'll be serving you today." Brielle's voice was flat, rehearsed, like a script being read for the 10th time. Amara smiled and gently reminded her, "I confirmed my meal last week." Brielle hesitated for just a moment, then responded, "We'll do our best to accommodate your request." A statement devoid of commitment. But Amara didn't react. She was used to this, to the chill wrapped in professionalism, to the gaze that never quite met her eyes, to being called ma'am while others were addressed by name. But she wasn't here to get angry. She was here to observe every small detail. And as Brielle turned away, her eyes briefly landed on seat 1B, where a white man leaned back in comfort, already receiving his second glass of champagne. Amara knew one thing for sure: her meal might never arrive, but the necessary data was already being recorded. She lightly tapped her smartwatch, a proprietary device developed by her own company, to activate cabin monitoring mode. Beneath the regal stillness of the first-class cabin, a system of observation began to run. Needing no sound and no confrontation, she would simply remain seated, silently, in seat 1A, and wait for the system to expose itself. The plane hummed softly beneath her seat as Flight 917 reached cruising altitude. In the first-class cabin, the lights shifted to a warm glow, and the air was filled with the scent of wax polish and delicate wine. Everything was flawless, from the crisp white tablecloths to the crystal glasses placed precisely to the left, except for the meal tray now resting in front of Amara Ellis. There was no silver lid, no bowl of soup, no perfectly medium rare slice of steak she always pre-ordered for long-haul flights. Instead, a cold chicken sandwich, coarse bread, a pale, limp lettuce leaf, and a half-filled glass of water. "Ma'am," came the voice of Brielle Maddox, the lead flight attendant, quiet and hollow. "We apologize, but the premium meal service has run out. This is a temporary substitute." Amara said nothing for several seconds. Her hand rested on the armrest, unmoved. She stared at the tray in front of her, as if it were a falsified financial report. Not because of its lack, but because of the deliberate absurdity embedded in it. "I placed my meal order a week ago. I have a confirmation code and a reminder email from the system," she replied, her voice calm and cuttingly cold. Brielle tilted her head slightly, her gaze drifting past Amara's eyes as though to avoid stopping any longer than necessary. "Perhaps the system didn't update properly. It happens often." Then she turned and walked away, as if a technical error was enough to dismiss the issue. Amara didn't call her back. She watched Brielle's retreating figure, the firm, confident stride of someone who knows she won't be questioned. In the luxurious, hushed atmosphere of the first-class cabin, it was the absence of an apology that made the loudest noise. A denied meal wasn't shocking, but the manner in which it was denied, effortless, unexplained, unsurprising as if it were perfectly normal, was what sent a chill down Amara's spine. She looked around. In seat 1B, a white man in a beige suit raised a glass of Chateau Mouton Rothschild red wine, chewing contentedly as another attendant refilled his drink. Behind her, 2 other men were being served their second course from the first-class menu. The attendants addressed them by name. "Mr. Malcolm, Mr. Clayton, we've prepared the duck breast you requested." Everything unfolded like a familiar stage play. But Amara, despite her status, qualifications, and extensive flight history, had no lines in the script. She inhaled, then gently swiped at her wrist. Her smartwatch lit up with an encrypted interface. A brief signal was sent to Naomi Bell, her executive assistant back in the Chicago office. The message contained only one line. "Pull cabin behavior logs, seat 1A, flight 917. Lyratech's system, the very platform Amara founded, would begin analyzing service timing, interaction frequency, tone of voice, eye contact, and facial expressions from the crew toward each passenger. No hidden cameras were needed. The data itself would become the evidence. Meanwhile, Amara sat upright, staring at the cold sandwich as if it were a mirror reflecting a truth. This was no longer about a meal. It was a test, not of her, but of an entire system conditioned to discriminate without leaving a trace. But this time, they had forgotten one thing. The person they deliberately overlooked was the one holding the system that would make sure they were never forgotten. Outside the first-class window, the pitch-black sky stretched endlessly like a velvet shroud, silent and unbroken. At over 11,000 meters above the Atlantic Ocean, Flight 917 cruised steadily toward Geneva, carrying its elite passengers across continents. Inside, the air was saturated with the scent of oak paneling, fine wine, and the quiet smugness of those long accustomed to being served. But in seat 1A, something had begun to shift, quietly, precisely, like background code executing silently within the architecture of a global security network. Amara Ellis sat still. Her gaze no longer lingered on the night sky, but had settled on the data feed glowing on her smartwatch. Naomi had responded. The system was now cross-referencing crew service times, vocal tones, name recognition speeds, and prioritization during interactions. All were being captured by a tool Amara herself had once presented at the AI Ethics Summit in Singapore the year before, a non-verbal behavioral analytics system integrated with machine learning, capable of detecting unconscious bias and discriminatory patterns in real time. The preliminary results were unsurprising. Average initial contact time for white passengers, 52 seconds. For passengers of color, nearly 4 minutes. Name-based address rate, 83% for white clients, only 17% for clients of color. For Amara's case, the system flagged it in red. No name used, no meal pre-order verified, no alternative offered, no apology issued. Amara nodded slightly. Not from surprise, but from confirmation. This was not a mistake. This was a pattern. A behavior so normalized it had been trained, accepted, and woven into the fabric of service culture. A kind of selective hospitality based on who appeared more deserving. But this time, the one excluded was the very person who had designed the tool to expose that exclusion. She looked forward at the glass partition, reflecting the soft ambient lights. Not a single crew member paused to ask if she needed anything. Meanwhile, hot towels, wine refills, and second-course desserts continued to flow like a synchronized ballet reserved for the 3 passengers behind her, those who never had to speak to be fully attended to. Amara swiped her watch again. The second message was sent: pull personnel file on Brielle Maddox, employee code F93. Scan for internal complaint history, service prioritization logs, and demographic interaction patterns. Naomi replied within 90 seconds. Brielle had been mentioned in 2 internal reports regarding preferential treatment toward high-potential clients, but was never disciplined due to insufficient evidence of bias. One buried email had been retrieved from the system. Tip-friendly passengers are the ones to prioritize. No one said white, but Lyratech's system had matched associated patterns with an 89% correlation. Amara breathed deeply. Everything was unfolding as it needed to. No rage, no protest. She did not need to raise her voice to prove she was right. She simply had to let the system speak. And this time, their own system would become the witness against them. No one in the cabin yet knew that within hours, Astoria Air's legal department would be called into an emergency meeting. And it would all begin with a denied meal and one woman who chose to sit quietly in the exact seat she belonged, seat 1A. Inside the first-class cabin, the lighting gradually shifted to a soft shade of blue, signaling the end of main meal service. The atmosphere settled into a long, quiet breath. Amara remained upright, not sleeping, not even resting her eyes, simply watching the reflection of the cabin lights across the window panel. Behind her, the clink of glasses and murmured conversations about the Asian markets, renewable energy stocks, and venture capital portfolios echoed from the 3 men in seats behind: Radcliffe, Malcolm, and Clayton. She knew their names not because they introduced themselves, but because the flight attendants addressed them by name as if they were long-time patrons. She, meanwhile, remained simply ma'am. Brielle never returned, never asked another question. No one wondered why the woman in seat 1A had only a cold sandwich and a glass of water. Everything unfolded as if the world had long accepted her exclusion, softly, without confrontation. But Amara was no longer the final-year MIT student, once turned down for an internship for lacking professional polish. She was the architect behind the Swiss National Bank's quantum encryption system, the same woman who addressed the Davos Economic Forum on AI ethics. And precisely because of that, when she tapped her watch and sent a simple message to Naomi, "Begin cabin behavior source trace, tag by passenger ID," everything began to shift. Minutes later, her watch buzzed. Naomi replied with comparative data across service times, facial recognition logs from cabin cameras, and Brielle's response intervals per guest, revealing a stark service disparity based on race and gender. Most notably, Black female passengers on the last 5 flights had experienced wait times 4 times longer than the average. Amara then calmly signaled to the male attendant, Daniel, as he passed by. He stopped and bowed respectfully. "I have a small question," Amara said, her tone gentle, devoid of anger. According to Astoria Air's internal policy, when a Diamond Tier passenger has pre-selected a meal that turns out unavailable, how is priority reassigned? Daniel froze slightly. He glanced toward the galley, then around the cabin as if searching for an escape route. "Typically, it's based on booking order and flight frequency, ma'am." Amara nodded. "I booked mine 7 days ago, and I averaged 12 first-class flights per year." Her voice remained quiet, but each word landed like the cold prick of a needle. Daniel pressed his lips together. "It might have been a system error," he offered, avoiding her gaze. Amara smiled faintly, the kind of smile worn by someone all too familiar with well-rehearsed explanations. "Thank you. I understand." She didn't need to say anything more. From this moment on, the data would speak for her. As the wheels of Flight 917 screeched gently against the runway of Zurich International Airport, the first-class passengers tilted slightly in their seats. A few yawned, others turned on their phones to check emails or text waiting drivers. Everything seemed to unfold like any other premium flight. But beneath that polished surface, a chain of events had been quietly activated. Precise, cold, and irreversible, like a crisis response system built not to make noise, but to protect integrity. Less than 30 minutes before landing, Amara Ellis had sent one final command from her smartwatch. "Activate Redline 917. Emergency. Transmit full cabin interaction data, crew behavior logs, passenger 1A cross-check." This was no random action. Within Astoria Air's internal partner infrastructure, Redline 917 was a high-level strategic alert code, triggered only when the brand's global reputation was at serious risk. At Astoria Air's European headquarters in Geneva, the system responded immediately. An emergency meeting involving the legal, human resources, and brand risk departments was scheduled within 3 hours of the flight's landing. Meanwhile, inside the cabin, no one was aware that throughout the flight, every interaction between crew and passengers, approach times, name usage, vocal tone, and service order had been logged, analyzed, and assessed by Lyratech's integrated behavioral bias detection model. As the aircraft came to a complete stop and the seatbelt sign chimed off, passengers began standing, collecting their belongings. Amara remained seated, eyes forward, hand resting calmly on the leather bag across her lap. She was in no hurry. She had no need to rush. Because ahead, at the priority exit, 2 individuals stood waiting. Ethan LaRue, European CEO of Astoria Air, and Marianne Koenig, Senior Legal Advisor for Brand Risk. Neither carried a clipboard, and their expressions were void of excess emotion. As Amara approached, both bowed slightly, just enough for nearby passengers to recognize who truly held power. "We would like to extend our sincerest apologies," Ethan began, but Amara cut in softly. "No need to apologize. What needed to be done has been done. Now it's your turn." Her voice never rose, but each word landed with the force of an executive order, measured, justified, and beyond debate. Immediately after, the flight crew was instructed to exit via the rear of the aircraft, a rare move for any premium flight. Brielle Maddox, still composed in posture, stepped out with her team, unaware that 3 compliance officers awaited with tablets displaying a message. Flight Crew 917, emergency hearing summons, internal code, behavioral violation. As Brielle read the line, she froze. For a brief moment, her eyes scanned the area, as if hoping someone might speak up in her defense, or at least confirm this was a misunderstanding. But no one did. Daniel, the flight attendant responsible for the other half of the cabin, looked on with a neutral expression. No sympathy, no comment. The service smile was gone. The silent authority she once held in that cabin had vanished. And Amara? She walked into the VIP lounge like any ordinary passenger. No escort, no announcement. But her phone had already received Naomi's notification. Data transmitted successfully. Board of Directors has received the full report. Behavioral authentication complete. A system had just exposed itself, and from this moment on, it no longer had the right to remain silent. 3 days after Flight 917 landed in Zurich, an emergency meeting was convened on the 41st floor of Astoria Air's global headquarters in Geneva. The glass-walled boardroom was silent, the only sound being the steady turning of pages as more than a dozen board members count. Through the 23-page report titled Discriminatory Cabin Service Behavior, Flight Code 917, Red Alert Level. Just beneath that title was a smaller, bolded line, Urgent Response under Aviation Ethics Code. On the large projection screen, cabin footage played in slow motion. Amara Ellis sat upright in seat 1A, a tray of cold food and a glass of water in front of her. Behind her, 3 white male passengers, Radcliffe, Malcolm and Clayton, raised glasses of red wine and were served a second course. The cabin microphone captured the moment clearly. "Sorry, we've run out of premium meals, ma'am," said Brielle Maddox. No apology, no alternative offered, no eye contact. Next came a data chart generated by Lyratech's behavioral recognition system. The average response time for first-class white passengers was 41 seconds. For passengers of color, the figure exceeded 6 minutes. Amara Ellis, with a first-class flight history spanning a decade and more than 120 premium trips, was denied every special service she had pre-booked. No one in the room dared to call it an oversight. One staff member attempted to interject. It might have been a system glitch. But Ethan LaRue, regional director for Europe, cut him off with a slight shake of the head. "We no longer have the right to make excuses." Then came the action recommendations. Speaking on behalf of Lyratech, not Amara this time, but her assistant Naomi Bell, joining via secure feed from the Chicago office, the message was clear. "We're not asking for an apology. We're not seeking compensation. What we demand is tangible reform. If Astoria Air intends to remain among the world's top 10 airlines, it is time to purge the silent culture of exclusion." Following the meeting, the board enacted 3 unprecedented decisions. 1. The entire crew of Flight 917 was immediately suspended pending investigation. 2. All flights staffed by Brielle Maddox over the past 24 months would undergo a full behavioral review. 3. Dr. Amara Ellis was officially invited to serve as strategic advisor for the Luxury with Equity Reform Initiative, a redefinition of premium service through fairness, data, and ethical intelligence. The next morning, at Zurich Airport, a team of technicians quietly affixed a small plaque to seat 1A in the first-class cabin. No gold, no diamonds, no pomp. Just 3 etched lines on brushed steel. Seat of change in honor of Dr. Amara Ellis. We remember you. That same day, Amara boarded a new flight, this time from Zurich to Cape Town, where she would speak at the Global Forum on Data and Human Rights. No press, no statements. As she stepped into the first-class cabin and saw the plaque, she simply smiled and took her seat. No words were needed. But somewhere, a system had begun to change. Because one woman chose to sit firmly in her rightful place and refuse to be forgotten one more time. In a world where prejudice often hides behind the veil of professionalism, and silence is mistaken for courtesy, the story of Amara Ellis reveals that true power does not lie in loud resistance, but in the ability to force an entire system to confront itself through data, through accountability, and through a presence that cannot be ignored. If you believe that justice should not be just a slogan, but something protected through action, then like this video, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the journeys that awaken systems from within.